welcome you on behalf of the Rancho Bernardo Historical Society to our museum. And I'll just quickly mention the next program, October 8th. October is National Family History Month, and in honor of that month, we're going to present a special two-part program dealing with family history. At 9:30, Peggy Rossi, who you briefly met here, who in addition to being our museum collections manager, is also co-owner, co-founder with myself of Story Seekers, a family history research company, and she will be giving a talk on getting started in family history research. And following her talk at 11 o'clock, Susan Hill of Photo Darkroom will be giving a talk about how to save and take care of old photographs. So I think this should be a very interesting program, and I invite you all to check our website for further information. Now, today's speaker is Mary Shepardson, speaking on the bounty of Poway agriculture. We're very proud to have her here. She is the Vice President of the Poway Historical and Memorial Society, and she writes a regular column on Poway history for the Pomerado Group newspapers, and she served for a time as mayor of Poway. So she's been involved both in making Poway history as well as preserving it, and we're quite happy to welcome her, and I ask you all to welcome Mary Shepardson.
I was a weird child. We came here in 1949 when I was 3 years old. From an early age, I was interested in Poway history. My parents were. My brother could not care less. But started looking back at things that I did back in the day. So anyway, Poway, for most of its early history, was defined by its agriculture. And this is an example. This was from the late 20s, when it was kind of to speak. These were some of the many samples of produce that the Poway Farm Bureau had for their exhibit at an exhibition in Melville Park. They did this every year, and it was a big deal. These are names of the farmers from whom they come. We can read all of them but one, which is something deposit, and most of them are names that were significant in history. Okay. Let's see. It's going to work. I don't know.
It's the, it's these.
It wasn't working. So
it wasn't?
Okay, now it is. Okay. Poway and Rancho Bernardo are sort of the non-identical twins. Rancho Bernardo, as you probably know, was defined by Rancho San Bernardo. And Poway is not. This is from the book here, Illustrated History of Southern California, including Poway. This is the brand of the San Diego Mission, and just closest I could come to a picture. During Spanish and Mexican times, Poway was referred to as a resort of the herds of the padres. They had cattle out here. The Native Americans tended them. We have some birth certificates going back to the 1930s of people who were born here during this. No, they were Native Americans. These were not Spaniards who were born here. This comics, pardon me, it's kind of pardon the dig at Rancho Bernardo, but it says Poway was not caught in the strangling loop of the Mexican grant. So it was the grant for Poway was awarded to Rosario Aguilar. He never took possession of the land, so it remained private land. And when it became California, it became a state. It became California property. So in 1858, Mr. Croswith, who was not an American, he was an Irishman, who had come to San Diego and jumped ship and wound up being here. He was involved in the wars, and he came to Poway at one point. He purchased 1,138 acres in Poway for $250 for a cattle ranch. Due to a number of things, including drought, he soon left. He went to Old Town. He was prominent there. He later moved to Rosarito. He has family now on both sides of the border. Rosarito, yeah. And one of his great-granddaughters was the partner of a friend of mine from high school. And so it's quite a thing. So we have at the museum adobe blocks from his house that was taken out in the 1990s when they built Creekside Plaza. And some of them were given to our late former Mayor Bob Emery. His wife gave one of them to me, and I gave it to the granddaughter of Mr. Crossway, who was really excited to have it. He married a woman from a prominent Spanish-Mexican family when he got here, so he wound up being totally bicultural, as is his family today. They go back and forth across the border.
In Old Town, or?
He was in Old Town at one point.
Yeah.
But then he went through it, and he was, all the details are not on the top of my head here, but he had elected positions in San Diego that was very prominent. So he touched Poway very briefly, but he set us on the route that we would take. These are pictures this is from 1883, similar period. These were Poway's agricultural routes. These pictures are down in the south end of Poway, beyond where Big Stone is. And it talks, and I will leave a file here if you want to print these out and look at them closer. We're also going to post them eventually on our Facebook page. But there were many kinds of produce grown here, many kinds of trees. They grew their vineyards, but at that time there was no interest in the wine industry here. This was S.G. Blaisdell, who started farming in the same area. He had 4,000 grapevines, about half of them were muscats. One of his distinguishing things is he is the man who brought Kate Sessions to San Diego. They came down, and she and he started a nursery. He had the Poway nursery for many years, was the only nursery around, and grew a lot of crops. So it's all interwoven. And this was Orlando Chapin's ranch. He was a Poway pioneer. He also was one of the two men who subdivided what is now Old Poway. And this is again from the same book, and I'll make sure that it has the information from the book so it can be shared, because it was a really interesting look at us from outside back in the day. They talked about the rain and how beneficial it was for crops. That's not so much anymore.
Ever mall now place
What's what?
in the second sentence there. It's
I don't know. That's one name we've never come across. And there was very little record keeping from the early 1890s, so you can look, maybe someday we'll find it. I found things I didn't think I would ever find.
Yeah. So it was a stagecoach mail route? It was a mail route?
Was
The original
it was
route of that?
the San Diego Escondido stage, which went through Poway, served many purposes, primarily taking people, but it also took the mail.
Mail.
And it came through every day but Sunday in both directions.
Oh.
And it stopped, Poway was the halfway stop on it. So, anyway, as I said, water has long been always an issue with agriculture. These are just some examples of water in the early days. This one you can tell, or you'll get a better picture. There are power lines in the background, so that's not early. But that was the windmill with the accompanying water tank, which made things much easier for you to irrigate. This was a stone cistern that appears to have been built by one of the Fletchers, who built Fletcher Hills and built all the reservoirs in the county. They owned land in southwest Poway. My father was a good friend of Colonel Ed Fletcher. We wound up buying the property where our house was from them, down fairly close there.
There's a Fletcher Cove also.
Yes, there's the Fletcher Cove. The Fletchers had a hole in Del Mar, where there are the houses along the beach. There was a whole row of two-story houses that were Fletcher family houses at one point. Most of them have been seriously remodeled, but some you can still see the original. Of the many crops Poway grew, peaches were the most famous. And this was Lewis Kent, the Kent family, one of the most prominent agriculture families in Poway. Lewis Kent delivered the peaches to San Diego with this rig. Locally they would be eaten fresh, but because of transportation, they had to be dried from most places they shipped them to. And the Poway peaches apparently were famous even back east. Lewis Kent was famous because when he sold you a box of peaches, the good ones weren't all on top. And it earned him endless praise for this. Not totally sure why the peaches all went away. Drought may have been part of it. What I heard growing up was that one of the floods, probably 1960 or 1926 or later one, the soil got so saturated there were nematodes.
It was,
And the nematodes supposedly got on the roots of the peach trees and destroyed them. There are still some peach trees at Poway. There were some that survived. But Poway was almost synonymous with peaches in the latter part of the 19th century and the early 20th century. This is looking at some of the other crops. This was the latest modern device. That was John Lawson's gas-powered baling machine. This was threshing for grain, and that's just a group of workers taking a break at the harvest. Oh, one more. What? Okay. Marcos, look at this corn. I'm pretty sure it was field corn, but that's impressive.
oh my God.
Yeah.
And I think this is somebody's head sticking out of a barley field. Both of these would be along the Midland Road area near Old Poway, where Rattlesnake Creek went by, the water table would have been high, because these would have been dry farm crops. And as you can see, they were very impressive.
Those crops of corn.
Okay, table grapes were grown pretty much all over Poway. This was the Tassel's farm. When I was a child, we rented the house on that property for a while, and I remember walking through the grapevines on the way to go to Midland School, which was then Pomeranian School. These, I'm trying to read this. This was in the Twin Peaks Road area. The Kents, the people, beach people also in the grapes.
And that farm, you said your family lived on, who were the owners prior to that?
The what?
The farm that you said your family...
Oh, well, it belonged, we were renting it from the Tassels.
Oh,
And
Tassels.
Mr. Tassel had come here from England in 1910, and he had grapes among other crops. His second wife was Big Tassel, later Big Michaels, who was very well known in college. She was my first grade teacher. She taught art. She was just a famous local character.
Is the house still standing?
No, long gone. You'll see the name Victoria Estates Lane. Her subsequent husband named his subdivision after her.
There's also a Tassel Road. too.
Yeah, and Tassel Road is misspelled. Always has been. The sign says Tassel, and I thought, idiots would put that up misspelled. No, if you look on the map, there are no addresses on the sides of houses. But there's a Tassel Road. It's named after one of the water district directors. They named after him.
What should the spelling be? C-A-S-T?
No, Tassell.
Oh.
They spelled it with one L.
C-A-S?
Tassel. Tassel, T is in Tom.
Oh.
And we had wine too. Wasn't just here. This was the Valley's branch out on Garden Road, sort of beyond the end of Poway Road. And they, like the Rizos, were ready when Prohibition was repealed in 1933. These pictures were, this was 36 or 37. And I printed out this label, and we have it on a bottle at the museum, but I'm pretty sure that would be on a gallon bottle. So we were not talking gourmet wine. But they were there for a long time.
They were drinking on my birthday.
Yeah.
Field crops, this is just a couple of examples of the many field crops they grew. This is Tooth Rock at the end of Twin Peaks Road. You see it? This is one of the few places in Poway, probably, where they would have the proper soil for growing potatoes. It would have to be deep and loose, and so had to be along the creek. As we know, most of the soil here is either decomposed granite or clay. But in the valleys of Poway, there tends to be bottom soil that's washed down, and it tends to be very good for agriculture. watermelons. This was very near where the winery was. And those are and it said the melons would be taken to San Diego and then sent to Los Angeles. And I know they had seeds, but those are mighty fine looking watermelons. Okay, dairy farming from the early days played a role in Poway. The Powers dairy was the longest dairy there. Mrs. Powers, who was Grandma Powers when I was growing up, was the daughter of Lewis Hillary, Poway's first doctor. And I think there are still some descendants in Poway. But they had the dairy, and this was groundbreaking in probably the very late 50s, early 60s, when they opened Poway Dairy Cash and Carry. Before that, as you may recall, we got our milk delivered to us. Even when we lived in remote places, Poway was nobody around. It came and delivered milk to us. This was in 1913, and this is Mrs. Flint with their international truck. The back of it, which you can't really see here, had cream cans in it. The farmers would probably feed the milk to the pigs or whatever. The cream would be put in the cans and taken to San Diego. This was before refrigeration. And we have one of those cans in the museum. In the late 1960s, Mrs. Porter, who had the antique store where Old Poway is now, gave it to the Chamber of Commerce for an auction. And I bought it in a bidding war with the auctioneer's wife. And donated it to the museum. So it is sitting there.
They're huge steel cans.
Right.
No, these are the cream cans. The milk cans are like this, the cream cans are like that. The cream can's only about that tall.
Is there one back there? Is that what you saw? It's right in the back of the desk.
That's a milk can.
That's a milk can. The cream cans are much smaller. And we know it's Archie Flint's cream can because he has a brass plate on it with his name. So that is pretty cool to have something. We have the picture with the can in it, and we have the can. And we know where it came from. So that's one of the things we're really lucky to have. After the Powers, most of the dairy farmers in Poway were Dutch. And they came in the early 1940s. I remember when we were living in High Valley in 1949, they came up this dirt road to deliver our milk. The young family, they were very hardworking and successful. The more money they made, the more the relatives they brought over. In Hollandia Dairy in San Marcos, that was from the people in Poway. And this was off Pomerado Road, north of Poway Road. Poultry was largely turkeys in Poway, although there were some chickens. This is the Frank home, which he was one of the early farmers, and this is about where Target Center is now. And this one is undated, and it's a woman with a bunch of turkeys. I think it's a great picture. This was the Vaughn's Turkey Ranch, which is where Walmart is now. And these were the Millards. I went to school with their children. They had turkeys up off what's now Millards Road, which is past Espola Road, going up on Poway Road. And they sold primarily turkey eggs rather than selling turkeys. Turkey eggs. Now, whether they were eating them or growing turkeys from them, I didn't ask. Okay, now this picture, Johnny Lawson with a gang plow. This has nothing to do with the narrative, except for I believe this was taken in what is now Rancho Bernardo. This, I think, is the Montiel home, which was where Summerfield Estates is now, right at the, on Espola Road at the boundary between Poway and Rancho Bernardo. There was a knoll there, and there was a two-story white house on it with trees. When I was an early teenager, we had friends who had horses there. We spent a lot of time there. And at that time, this area was in alfalfa, which they fertilized with pig manure. It didn't smell very good. Anyways, I said, it's kind of a tie in between the two that I thought was interesting.
And who's that in the picture?
Who's that?
The name? I see it. Is it-
John Lawson.
Oh, John Lawson.
Yeah.
John.
There were so many Lawsons that the Merton School in South Poway in the early days, about half of the students were Lawsons. They were a prolific family. Now, John I knew in his later years. He was a friend of my dad's. And he had cattle, he had some cattle. He lived on Oak Knoll Road where the temple is now, whatever it is. And he had his house there. And he had cattle where Poway Portals is on the west end of Poway Road. And when I was a girl, we were going for a walk and went by and one of his cows was having a calf. So we children got to see a calf being born. Pretty cool. Okay. After World War II, I think a lot of men wanted to be farmers. Get away with it. One of them was my father. In 1949, we moved to High Valley, brought by Jack Sparkman, who started the Alberta Country Club, which became Stone Ridge. He made his money with Hawaiian Punch. He was an entrepreneur and promoter. So bought most of High Valley. We got some of it. We're planting lemon trees. You can see the pipes for water. I don't know what this was they were planting. And they dug deeper and deeper wells and saved them in a reservoir, which was up on the top of the hill in High Valley. That's me right there. And this would have been about 1952. And then in 1952, they realized they were running out of water and they needed to do something. So a group of men, including my father, got together. The aqueduct was already going through power. We just didn't have any access to it. We couldn't just use the bottled water. And so this group of men got together and formed a group to study this. And I can't read this, okay. Here's Harry Tassel again. My father was the chairman. Harry Tassel, Wilmer Williams, who was the manager of the Alberta Ranch. And they got together and did this. And the citizens voted to have a water district 210 to 32. More amazingly, they approved a bond issue for $600,000, which was more than the entire assessed value of Poway at the time.
Yeah.
This is a leap of faith. When water finally arrived, and it had happened, no environmental impact reports or anything, they approved this 1952, 1954, we had water. And this was the water holiday, which was in the eucalyptus grove north of where Target Center is now. And just about everybody turned out. We had speeches, we had a barbecue. It was called the water holiday. Kids thought it meant we didn't have to take a bath.
Yeah.
But it was a big deal for years. They would have the water holiday every fall on the anniversary of this. They later called it the Water Festival or something. Yes,
Where were they drawing water from?
Colorado River.
Okay, by way of pipe?
And the aqueduct that comes through here.
Okay, in that aqueduct. Okay.
Yeah, that was the first barrel. The second one went in later, but yeah, it was coming through. So they tapped into it. This is Bridlewood. This is my dad. This is Les Berglund, who was the foreman for the district, and they're getting the first water. Their first office was in a little building on what was in the Whitten Ranch, which used to be considered part of Bernardo and was near the site of the original Bernardo School. Everything, even though it wasn't Rancho Bernardo, everything east towards like Poway was considered Bernardo at one point.
Yeah, I remember that, and Mary, I remember Poway, Mary, Mary, in her book, and she makes it when she mentioned how about the first Bernardo school, or
They lived where the Target Center was.
Yeah.
The Bernardo School was near Lake Poway Road.
Yeah.
She, as a child, walked to school. They passed only one other child who was going to school with them on that entire route.
Is that where Lake Hodges is now?
No, Lake Poway.
Oh, Lake Poway.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I country. Yeah.
Okay, this was our newspaper, Poway Weekly, in 1954. This announces proudly that the $600, $1,000 bonds were issued after being sold by the secretary, signed by the secretary of the district. Then this notes that High Valley, where I showed you the earlier pictures, was receiving water directly from the aqueduct. that they were faced with the shortage of water and the loss of 160 acres of avocado trees. This is the kind of desperation that brought the water. And this notes that Rancho Valverde, which was basically everything north of Rancho Bernardo on the south side of the Spola Road, which was the people purchased in 1948, and then they sold part of it to Howard Smiths, a Pacific Iron Steel who did Green Valley. And they reported him as being Henry Smith instead of Howard Smith, but same guy. And he would put in 400 acres in avocados, and this would become the largest avocado grove, I think, in the United States, certainly in California.
Is that the one that you see from Poway Park, that big patch of green, that's avocado ranch?
No, you would see it if you go east on the Spola Road. There's the Green Valley subdivision. It was on the hill behind there. We'll go a little bit more into that later. This was such a big, and Poway was the first dry community to get direct access to the Colorado River water. So this was a huge thing. And this was a magazine called Title Topics. These are a few pages from an issue in 1955 that was devoted to Poway, the new oasis. This was the first water tank, which is up on the hill above where the water holiday was held. And this is just showing, imagine getting to use rainbird sprinklers. Another beef cattle, I think that was also on Quinton Ranch, although it was not identified. Field crops, fruits. This is just showing the changes that were happening in Poway.
Was there need for water treatment centers?
That never occurred to anybody then.
Never did.
I would say that the Colorado River water was very hard,
Yeah.
but I don't think it had a lot of microbes in it, probably because it was so hard.
Yeah. My folks didn't make it through.
Okay, this was an early lemon grove. This was in Valverde. You can see they had avocados and many kinds of citrus. If you look, these were the avocados. Through here would have been the citrus, and here's Rancho Bernardo. So that was shown in 1959. Howard Smith's, not long after he started planting, started developing. You see the avocado trees in the yard of this house at Martin Coit and Acorn Patch. That was our house. And it had avocado trees all around it. My father, who loved being an orchardist, was in hog heaven. And so basically, the bringing water was a boon to Poway agriculture. It was also the end of Poway agriculture. As the land became more valuable as home sites than it was for crops. So this, I particularly like this one. In 1956, the Bruins Dairy was sold to out-of-town developers. It was where, if you are familiar with South Poway, tell where Matati Road comes off of Poway Road shortly before you get to Big Stone. So they sold this, and it was developed into a number of different projects, including Tustin Hills Ranchos, which was not in Tustin, was not on a hill, and did not have horses. But they sold them. This was the Vaughn's Turkey Ranch. This is approximately the same view today. It's the Vaughn's Shopping Center. Behind it is Walmart. The Walmart was probably about where the actual turkey ranch was.
Wally Road.
Wally Road.
Wally Road, yeah.
And this was an aerial view looking from the east end of Garden Road in 1945. This is a view of a similar view today. So basically, that is Poway's. Poway's almost exactly 100 years from when Crossway bought his first cattle ranch until late 1950s. It was 100 years of agricultural Poway. So that was essentially the first 2/3 of Poway. Now we're in the third ones. So be happy to answer any questions. And if I can do a couple of commercials. We are having an exhibit in the Poway Historical Society Museum through fall of agriculture in Poway. So there are a lot of agricultural implements and stuff. They're closed tomorrow, but they're open Saturdays from 10 to 2 and Sundays from 11 to 2. Second commercial. Second commercial.
Yeah.
Sunday, September 18th, we're having our third annual Poway History Tour, which is essentially an open house. The Community Church's historic chapel, built in 1886, will be open with docents explaining what's going on. The Dearborn Cemetery, also dated 1886. Well, they do a great job. They mark with flags the significant graves there. And they have a little brochure they pass out that explains who the people are there. Many of our early people, including John Dearborn, who was the first person to be buried there, and it's got named after him. It was donated by Dr. Hillary, who was an amazingly charitable person. He donated land for community church, although it was later built someplace else. And he was also a farmer. He grew alfalfa, among other things. So Dearborn Cemetery, also for, if you want to go way back, the I cannot pronounce it. Kamei Interpretive Center that has the Native American exhibits is fascinating. They're going to have docents on that. The museum and the historic Nelson House will also be open extended hours.
Is all of that currently advertised on the internet?
It's on our Facebook page. And I think the city of Poway is listed on there as well. I have a couple of them here.
But that shouldn't mention the place that is not listed.
Well, yeah, there is be one of the historic homes, which is the Plaisted House, which is in the old Poway area. We don't list it on there because we don't want to put a private home's address on it. But the information will be at the museum. And it's a great old house, and they've lovingly restored it.
We can make copies. Of
Yeah, I bought 5 of them so you can make more copies.
Oh.
But it's pretty good. As I said, it's no charge. We welcome donations, of course. But I think it's a pretty good event. It's a chance to go in and take a close look at the things that were historic to this area. Two of them old, and one of them really old.
The place I wanted to ask about, the guy who edited the Poway Progress newspaper for a few years, Mr. Parnell.
Yeah.
And there's a picture of his farm in, as I remember, Poway.
It's about where City Hall is.
Is that what? Okay, great. City Hall. Okay. I just wondered about that.
Yeah, it's my 5th grade teacher lived in that house for a number of years. And well, eventually, when they went to tear it down, the walls were full of honeycombs.
Really? Oh my goodness.
Lots of bees.
Well, thank you very much for your.
Thank you.